Welcome everyone to the first edition of the SDG Action Conclave 2020, and we are conducting today's session focusing on SDG Goal 10, that is, reducing inequality within and among countries. Let me give you a brief about our initiative. Youth Forum is a project under the Alexis Society, and our team consists of inspired young students and professionals who are solely interested in creating positive social impact by conducting research on policy issues, writing thought provoking and insightful blogs, designing creative social campaigns, organizing life changing events, and interviewing leaders and change makers. As it is correctly said that the youth are not only the leaders of tomorrow but also the partners of today. So, we at the Youth Forum, a team of creative and encouraging individuals with a shared mission, a mission to change the world. So, through the first edition of the SDG Action Conclave, we wish to bring together the change makers and the leaders from around the globe under the Act for SDGs campaign week of the United Nations. It will help to prepare an actionable agenda that will aid all in achieving the sustainable development goals through all the initiatives and more. While the world leaders meet virtually at the United Nations General Assembly to take up the trying issues and give a solution to the tough times, we are doing a small bit by taking action and raising awareness and initiating a better direction ahead. The turning point of the planet and of the people needs to be now. Let me now introduce to you the speaker. First of all, ma'am, we are very glad to have you with us today. Ma'am Indrani Pal Chaudhari is a multidisciplinary artist working in film, photography, speaking, marketing, eco and social justice advocacy. She co-created the image for 300 global brands such as Pepsi, Nike, L'Oreal, Beyonce, Lady Gaga, and David Bowie. She is a UN Women's Entrepreneurship Distinguished Fellow, a prolific public speaker at prestigious conferences and universities such as the Harvard University, Kennedy School Carr Center. She is a Princeton University anthropologist and visiting lecturer on mobilizing millions at the intersection of art, film, and social good. Discovered and mentored by David Bowie and Iman, who commissioned her first album art while a student, then her directional debut, she launched Beyonce and Lady Gaga's solo careers, creating their debut album art. She also collaborated with Jennifer Lopez, Kate Winslet, Jay-Z, Keanu Reeves, Kim Kardashian, to name a few. Born in Calcutta and raised volunteering with Mother Teresa as an international teen model actor, she co-founded the Shakti Empowerment Foundation for 300 children and women, which she executive directs. A proud LGBTQIA advocate, empowering diversity and sustainability, she is a seasoned leader, building impact-oriented programs and directing global foundations. She is a recipient of 29 awards, including the Tribeca Film Festival 2019 Disruptive Innovation Award, and her work is in museums worldwide, from the permanent collections of the National Portrait Gallery at the Smithsonian, the Brooklyn Museum, the Australian Museum of the Moving Image, and the Lincoln Center. Leveraging the power of media, music, fashion, celebrity branding, and education, her work constantly empowers equality, diversity, and environmental sustainability. She harnesses the expertise in her field of work to bring changes in the rigid systems of the society. Her ideas and capacities are limitless in creating novel, innovative avenues. She's a change maker and introduces much needed cultural updates to society. Greetings to you, ma'am. We're very honored to have you with us. Now,
I'm
let me
thrilled to be
introduce.
here.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me now introduce to you the chair. So Kunal Mandal is the co-founder of GameSpace, a gamification company which uses quizzes and other games as a tool for personal growth and people engagement, and citybitesindia.com, which is a travel portal which helps travelers discover and book inspiring city experiences provided by local experts. Currently, he is on a mission to teach curiosity as a life skill, increase awareness about sustainability, and empower young Indians to be more than what they thought they could be. So, to take forward discussions while trying to arrive at solutions to this session on SDG 10, I would like to hand over the conduct to Mr. Kunal, sir.
Thank you so much, Aruti, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you here who is joining in and listening in. I have a very, very special guest for today's session. I have the beautiful and brilliant Indrani Pal Chaudhari with me. And it's a special privilege for me as well because she comes from the same city that I come from. So, Indrani, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be here with both of you and all the others speaking today.
Indrani, as I said, I'm glad that I finally, through this series of interviews that I'm doing, I'm glad to find someone who is from the same city as I am, which is the Calcutta. And you worked as a volunteer with Mother Teresa and Ramakrishna Mission in the city that we all love and grew up in. So my question is that, was it during this time or your time in Calcutta that you realized that at some point of your life you would want to work towards reducing inequalities and goal number 10, because you worked with these stalwarts, probably that's a life-changing moment. I mean, I would love to know more about it.
Well, I was very fortunate from a very young age. My parents were both volunteers, both with Mother Teresa and at the Ramakrishna Mission. And so from the age of 3, when I could first act as a translator for my mother, because my mother didn't speak Bengali, but I did. My father's Bengali, but my mother is English. So I got to spend time with the wonderful people who are doing incredible work in those areas for social equality and for the home for the dying, orphanages, and people who were in dire need. And I was able to see just how much a person could impact others by giving of themselves fully. So I was very inspired by the examples of Mother Teresa and Ramakrishna and the many wonderful people who are doing great work in Calcutta.
Wow, I mean, growing up in Calcutta is pretty interesting as well for me, and I think a bit of Ramakrishna Mission's influence has also been on me, because my father was also an ardent sort of follower, and Vivekananda was always discussed in dinner tables and chai addas and so and so. So great to hear that you found your inspiration in my city as well. Now, you started off as a model and then photographer and then went on to become a director. As I see it, your career became sort of a window for you to gain diverse cultural perspective. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about how this journey, was, and what were some of the major learnings on the way that you can share with the young audience that we have.
Absolutely. Well, I was born in India, in Calcutta, as you mentioned, and I grew up in a place 2 hours outside in Ranagat. And so, as a small child, I saw the extremes of those who had and those who did not have enough, refugee families everywhere, and all of the problems there. And then I became an immigrant myself. My family moved to England and Canada, and I experienced also the challenges of lack of income of my parents. They ended up having 2 jobs each to work, and it was a very different lifestyle. So I learned very early how difficult it can be to have that income inequality to be such a defining factor in one's life. So I'm very grateful for those early experiences, both in India and abroad, that showed me that how quickly one's world can change, and just how unfair it can be for those who don't have enough. And I, of course, I was very fortunate compared to so many people. And when I came back to India as a teenager, and I realized just how little opportunity so many young women have because of the financial status, I was really devastated to see the sense of hopelessness that many of them shared. And I started a school called Shakti Empowerment Education when I was a teenager. So I had been modeling for a few years, and I traveled the world, and I'd saved up money doing that. And my goal with modeling was actually to learn photography. And so I did learn. I was able to work with some of the world's top artists and photographers and filmmakers, and I saved up some money. And so when I came back to India, I was just devastated to realize, how fortunate I was compared to others. And so I started the school, and then my father moved back from Canada to actually run the school. So he's been the real hero who's done incredible work for 20 years now to run the school, and I'm the executive director. So I handle the fundraising and some of the more administrative aspects of the school. And so for me, that endeavor, teaching these children, trying to give them what they were lacking, it taught me so much, and I learned so much from these young people. They're so resilient and so hardworking, and with so much tremendous potential. And that, to me, is one of the worst aspects of our world right now, is that the potential of so many wonderful humans is lost because of lack of access to education, and particularly the potential of women who have such amazing abilities, and very often those are neglected, and when they're married early, or they're prevented from completing their education. So that's become a very important topic for me to create work around and raise awareness for. And so when I became successful as a photographer, while I was a student at Princeton, I photographed all of these big celebrities, the list that you heard. David Bowie was a mentor for me, and so I was very fortunate again to have wonderful advisors, and to then be able to also work with Beyonce and Lady Gaga and people like that, and help them to establish their image, was really a wonderful opportunity. But I always remembered my roots, and was always running the school at the same time. And so I had this sort of two lives. On one side, I was having the glamorous artistic explorations, and doing advertising campaigns for Pepsi and all of, L'Oreal and all of these kinds of brands. And on the other side, I was coming back to India regularly to help with the school and doing various nonprofit projects. And I started to feel more and more torn by these two directions. And so I found a way through film to bring them together, and to focus on what I really was the most passionate about, and that is the ability for each human to transform themselves, and to be empowered. And so that is what I try to share through my work, whatever form it takes, whether I'm doing a comedy or a social justice piece. I always try to focus on that transformative spirit that each of us has, and help people to be reminded of all that we can do if we focus our energies.
Wow, transforming lives right from the very beginning, it seems. And if I'm not wrong, the school is essentially the family home that you had, which was transformed into the school. So,
That's right.
where is this school, if I may ask?
It's in Ranagat, which is 2 hours outside of Calcutta. In fact, we began it in the family home, but now it's expanded to, it has its own building, and it's separate. But it was, I felt very blessed to have this traditional 300-year-old home that wasn't being used for, we certainly had family there, but it wasn't being used to the fullest capacity. And so being able to transform that was transformative for me as well.
Wow, that's really wonderful. I mean, the story that you've shared with us, that's quite a journey, if one would say. And too many interesting ways that you found transformation in your life. And I think I don't know if this observation would be correct, but it seems to me that you have launched quite a few famous women's career as well, as you have
Yes.
transformed a lot of young women's lives back in India as well. So it seems to me that the way you connected the root, it came from that they were the inspiration for you to go and change other, legendary women's lives as well, in some ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. And working with these children initially, and then we also expanded to women's empowerment as well. And that really, I learned so much from these children and these women, because seeing how in a very short amount of time, given some basic education and resources, these women who had been in a very difficult position, where some of them were beggars, some of them, had their children were working in the factories and the fields, they were able to transform their lives within 6 months to a year, just raising chickens or growing vegetables, very simple skills, but they were able to do those so passionately and with so much love, that they could grow and then hire their own neighbors, and help their own communities to thrive and to take care of their families. So seeing that was incredibly empowering to me as well, to recognize, if someone with no education, no literacy, and with so many problems can change in these ways, each of us has no excuse except to really be the best that we can be.
As you rightfully said, we don't have any excuse. We have to be the best we can be to make the change happen in the world. And
Yes.
Indrani, I think this passion of yours have also somehow manifested in your work. I uh, noticed two of your short films, which are Girl, Epidemic, and Crescendo, have a
Yes.
very strong social message that comes along. And, in recent times, there have been changes in the Oscar criteria as well to showcase more diversity. The film, these days, the guidelines say that film should have at least one character from an underrepresented racial group, or the story must center on women or LGBTQ community or the disabled. And these are some of the guidelines that I was noticing that has happened. And so my question to you would be that when and what made you realize that this need of incorporating social justice advocacy is so important in your work and in your career?
Well, I would say I recognized that need from a very young age. From a personal, from my own perspective, as a young Indian girl growing up in Canada as an immigrant child, I felt that there was very few representations that I could identify with, and I realized that the majority of people felt the same way. Most girls didn't have role models or characters that they could really look um, to guide them. And so for me, it was just a natural evolution that I wanted to share those stories because I had been so fortunate to be surrounded by powerful women. So the idea that other girls didn't have that opportunity to see, my mother and Mother Teresa and my father as well as a great feminist, to have characters like that really was a great blessing for me. But I wanted to be able to share that with others. And so the films you mentioned, Girl Epidemic and Crescendo, those were both done with various nonprofits. Girl Epidemic deals with trafficking of girls, it deals with child labor and the other reasons for the disappearances of many girls throughout Asia and in fact throughout the world. This problem is everywhere. Um, and so we wanted to showcase, to give an example of the kind of story that people do react to. So it's actually a metaphor. It's not a realistic situation. It's scripted, and it's done in the vein of a thriller or a horror film, but focused on real situations that are happening and creating a metaphor so people can understand, in a way, something that's actually more complex.
Yeah, I think that's where film and storytelling plays a great role. Anything that is
Yes.
complex, these are the very very interesting way of presenting it to people so that we understand it the way it is and not some other way that someone is trying to portray. Um, well,
Yes.
I, I remember one of your quote once. You beautifully put that as a myth maker, shaping the parameters of the possible, I explore transformation and the intersection between epic fantasy and abject realism from diverse perspectives, inspiring change. I think that was so fascinating for me to hear. But what I was wondering is if you could give us a few examples of some of your work that had had a major impact and how you really envision them to pave the way for a change. And for example, the digital death is one of your projects that I noticed. So if you
Yes.
could tell us some of those projects that you are really proud of and probably had impacted a lot of lives, we would love to hear about them.
Sure, sure. Well, the Digital Death Project was very interesting because we were with a nonprofit called Keep a Child Alive. They asked me to create a campaign and a film and images to help raise awareness of AIDS in Africa and India. And at the time, it was still quite a taboo topic and also a topic that people just were not engaging with. And the response we were getting from audiences was that people just felt in the West, they felt that they couldn't relate to someone whose family is suffering from AIDS in Africa or India. And so we said, well, what would they, you know, if they don't care about these individuals because they feel they don't know them, what if we use individuals that they do know, like Kim Kardashian or Usher or, the Will Smith's kids. So we shot various celebrities like Alicia Keys, and we put them in coffins, and we made this beautiful image of their of their death. And it was a very shocking campaign, because people, of course, when they see a celebrity and they think that they've passed away, then they engage in a very emotional way. And so it was a real social experiment, and a very successful one. We raised millions of dollars in less than a week. We asked all the celebrities to stop their social media for that period as well. So they tweeted before they went silent that this is what's happening. If you want them to come back to life, you have to donate money. And it was remarkable because it had such a huge impact, and people felt, because they feel connected to these individuals even though they don't know them, so they cared enough to bring them back to life, even though really the goal was to help those who are in dire need. So it was a very effective campaign, and it used the shock value, but it also engaged people in thinking about, who do we hold dear? Why do we feel connected to some people and not to others? And where our priorities should be. So that campaign won two gold lions at Cannes Festival of Creativity, and the Girl Epidemic you mentioned before, it won the CNN Expose Award and the Tribeca Film Festival Award. And so there was a lot of accolades and a lot of press that these films generated. But really, the most important impact for me was seeing people engage in a different way and recognize that they have the power to make change for others, and that they have the power to engage people, if they can harness their own creativity. So now I'm teaching a class about that at Princeton, which is called Mobilizing Millions with Art and Film for Social Justice and Human Rights.
So, it's really fascinating the example that you shared with us, because it clearly shows that art has a lot of potential to make change happen, actual change happen. And you have done that through your work over and over again. And now you are teaching other people how to do it, I presume, through your course. So that means that I will come to this, because that means you have a framework which can help other people use their art and creativity and harness the power of that to make change happen in the world. So tell us a little bit about the course you do, or the framework that you follow or teach.
I believe that artists, and I include filmmakers as artists, but I believe that in our world right now, they have some of the most powerful voices. Films and images that we see shape the way that we interact, and create the mythology that we all share. And so I believe that along with that power is a huge responsibility. And that responsibility is to use the entertainment and the beauty and the emotional power of art to inspire people to make the world better, because we have a lot of problems in the world that we should be able to solve. People are stuck in an older way of seeing the world, in a view of scarcity. And that's because for thousands of years we've not had enough. But right now we actually are in a time of unprecedented abundance. There is enough food in the world to feed every human 3 times over. So there's no actual lack. What we lack is the ability to share, the ability to distribute resources in a way that everyone can benefit. And so I think that as a filmmaker, part of my responsibility is to help people to see what they can do, because each individual is incredibly powerful at creating, has the capacity to create change. They just have to find their ways. And now that we have these tools with social media, with the arts that are in everyone's hands, each person now, most people have a phone that they can take video with, take pictures. So art has suddenly become available to everyone, and so has the means of distribution. I really believe that each of us has in our hands, literally when we're watching something on a phone or on a computer, we have in our hands the capacity to create content as well, to create videos, photos, or to write in ways that we can encourage others to join with us for making the world better. And I think it's our responsibility to do exactly that.
Yeah, as you rightfully said, I think we have literally the power in our hands today with all the technology and devices that we have to tell stories that are within us, around us, and sort of stories that we have grown up with. Right.
Yes,
I listened
yes,
to. I was fortunate enough to listen one of the talks Shekhar Kapoor once gave, and he said that we are the stories we hear and tell. And I think that's absolutely sort of to the point here as well, because we need to tell more and more stories. And now, since everyone has that power to do it easier and faster, we should all become creative, right? So what would be like one or two tips that would give to our audience today through which they can a lot of people have these, they know that they have these technologies and they can create, but they don't always find the, all the questions they would ask is, I don't know where to find these stories, how do
sure.
I do it? So what would be your one or two advice to them?
Well, first of all, not everyone needs to be telling the stories. People need to be taking action. So first begin with action. Do something worthwhile and then you'll have a story that you can share, Make yourself the example that others can follow. It's very easy to criticize. Everyone says, "Oh, they should do this. This person isn't doing enough." But each of us needs to do, and then you don't lack any ability to tell those stories. That's worked for me, by creating a school. I've learned so much, and through that process I became a person that could help to inspire change to others. And I think that, of course, many people have wonderful stories around them, so those are great to share. But also, I think in the choices we make when we watch films or television, as consumers of content, if we choose only the entertaining ones, the blockbusters where everything blows up, then we're choosing to advocate for that ultimately. It's not to say that we shouldn't enjoy ourselves and be entertained, but also to choose wisely what we put into our own minds and what we support with our dollars or rupees or whatever. That is also a very powerful choice. And there's tons of content. Most filmmakers are not looking at the larger picture of how does this content help people, or how does it educate, or how does it help make the world better. And so you have a choice each time you turn on the television or purchase a movie or go to the theater in what kind of content you're going to support as well.
That's a very, very important point that you made, Indrani, that everyone who is listening in and joining in, remember the choice is a great power that you have. And with great power comes greater responsibilities, as Indrani said. So please
Absolutely.
be responsible and use that choice to make change happen in the world. Indrani, at this point, I just loved reading about some of your work, and there's one quote that again comes to my mind is, in a world where authenticity is an autograph and reality is a genre of TV, my images provide society a mirror to reflect upon its ideals and devotions. I found this quote to be very, very powerful. So I want to know from you that what was the thought process behind it, and you have seen societies or microcosms in different parts of the world, coming from India, then moving to Canada, and now in US. So you have seen diversity at scale. So my question is, of course, more about what was the thought process behind the code, and second is, sort of how are these, how sort of the major differences in different parts of the world in our struggle towards equality in all fronts, probably.
Well, those are great questions. And I think that people are far more alike than they are different. I think, when we speak about diversity, I think part of what we forget is that what diversity brings to every conversation is those multiple perspectives. Not that humans are intrinsically different just because they're from somewhere else, but they have had different experiences. They see different things that work or don't work and can bring together a much more powerful set of solutions to problems when you have that diversity. So that's regarding diversity. That quote that you mentioned is, for me, I think it's very important as we are entering a world now where what is the truth has become a question that we don't have answers to as easily as we used to. The news is no longer being trusted, and for many reasons, good and bad. But there's a lot of, because we have access to so much information, and because everyone does have the ability to share their perspective, there can be a lot of noise and a lot of distraction, and people can get a little bit lost in not only what's really happening, but also what they can do to create change. So I think it's very important that we recognize that while our entertainment has shifted, we watch a reality television, or we, whatever we're putting into ourselves by viewing, by consuming content, it becomes part of who we are. And so again, if we make conscious choices and we read broadly, we make sure that if we're on social media, that we listen to opinions that are different from our own, that we see what others of different groups, different from different parts of the world, or even different parts of our own cities, there's many divisions between people, and that we have to make the effort to overcome those by understanding, and it's there at our fingertips, but we have to go beyond what the algorithm gives us. We have to search out contrary points of view and try to understand them, not try to just knock them down, but see where they're coming from, and find where the truth really lies, which is usually in the middle between the two opposing perspectives. And in my images, what I've always sought to do is to help to create, either to challenge people's perspective, or to also bring out the transformative, that inner spark. So when I create portraits of whether it's a celebrity or a humanitarian worker or someone who's a survivor of domestic violence, whatever, whoever my subject is, I'm always looking for the divine spark within that I believe illuminates each of us.
Wow, that's such a lovely way to click someone, or probably bring out the true self of someone through your work. I mean, that must be really, really gratifying.
I find it very exciting because I'm always looking for that in everyone that I meet, and you find what you look for in life. If you look for the negative, you'll find that. But if you look for what makes each individual extraordinary and powerful and beautiful, you will find that as well.
I hope someday I am fortunate enough to be probably clicked by you. Let's let's hope for that as well. Um, Indrani, of course, we've spoken about multiple sections in your work and things like that. But I'll say that we're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, and art has a big role to play in communicating, whether it's filmmaking, photography, or any other form of art. It has a big role to play in communicating these goals to other people. And also sometimes, we don't really realize the truth sometimes, as you said, behind the actual problem. So if we're saying climate change, sometimes we say, I don't know if it's really happening, and things like that. There are this. So probably, art can bring those truth out in the way that human eyes cannot normally perceive, right? Because that's what art has always been to me. I mean, going to Guggenheim, there are very different ways. You just suddenly see the reality is transforming itself in front of your eyes in different ways manifested. So how do we really, really harness the power of creativity and art for the sake of a better planet and sustainable development goals?
That is a great question. And I believe that there are all many different ways to do that. There's, of course, documentaries, there's the fact based films which are educational and for the most part are very informative. But the reality is that most people only watch documentaries when they already care about the subject. So for me as an artist, I look to other kinds of art, so scripted thrillers, comedies, action films, the kinds of content that people don't go to because they want to be educated, but they want to be entertained. They want to escape. And I find ways to put into that an important message and to educate people through that. So that's my approach, and I encourage artists and filmmakers around the world to do the same and to have integrity in their filmmaking process, to make sure that if they're including stories about certain kinds of people, that those stories have accuracy, that they're not perpetuating stereotypes that are harmful, and that they're not creating unnecessary um, amounts of pessimism in the world. And I really think that we have a pathology of imagination. It's something that I believe that our society is suffering from, that we've seen so many of these apocalyptic films with the end of the world, whether it's zombies or aliens, or the planets are crashing, or of course global warming. I mean, some of these are inspired by the right, people rightfully worrying about the future, but the end result is that everyone is thinking, well, I just have to live for today because tomorrow is going to be horrible, instead of saying, how can we come together and solve these challenges so that tomorrow can be much better than anything we've seen before. And so I'm working on creating utopian stories as well, stories where we can imagine a future, because we've all become afraid of even imagining what that might be. There's such a great terror of the future right now that I think people don't realize it because it's such a natural, becomes a state of mind for so many people. But I really believe it's important to show the stories of the heroes who are really making change happen, and to show ways in which people are working on a better future, and there's wonderful work being done.
All the young filmmakers out there, those are some ideas that you can work on as well, and make change happen, and probably make global goals a little more positive and a little more popular. And thank you so much, Indrani, for sharing those ideas. And I definitely would look forward to seeing those utopian creations of yours that comes out hopefully soon. And
Thank you.
you know, at this point, I have before I go to Arushi for her questions. Uh, you were a speaker recently at Live Med Ed, and
Yes.
you said there that we can't wait for others to solve the problem. We have to step up and find the solutions. So, if I have to ask you that, what would be your top solutions for a brighter future, so that in a world where we have achieved SDGs by 2030, what would be some of those solutions or your blueprint for the future world?
That's a great question. Well, first we have to achieve those SDG solutions. And for people who don't know what the SDGs are, it really is a wonderful framework to look at the challenges that we face. But we also have to recognize that it doesn't cover everything, and that those challenges are going to keep changing as we advance. So we have to also update those goals. But I believe that we have to find ways to share the abundance that we have in the world, so that it becomes a planet that is continues to be livable for everyone. Because the idea that only a very small percentage of the world has the massive amount of the world's resources while everyone else is struggling, it's not good for the struggling people, but it's also not good for those few, because ultimately it's not a sustainable state of affairs, and no one wants to live in a destroyed planet where everyone is in terrible suffering. So rather than waiting till we get to a breaking point, I think we need to find ways to have that equilibrium to be restored, to encourage the ecologically sustainable solutions for energy and for the built environment, which is very important. Our cities are going to be doubling in size The built environments of the world are growing at a massive rate, and we're not building them in a logical, sustainable way, and we're not incorporating nature, and we're requiring more and more use of fossil fuels and all of these resources. So we have to rethink how we engage, and I'm working on a project as well to bring solutions into that space for the built environment. So technology is very important. I'm working also with scientists and inventors because there are so many solutions that are not being applied in the ways that they could be, that could really benefit the world. So I think it's very important that artists and scientists and politicians and educators and people across all the different areas come together and bring their skills together, because we need to have that combination to really solve these problems. They're too complex for any one person to solve, but when we all come together, there's no reason why we can't achieve a fantastic future for us all.
Wow, I really loved how you are bringing all the stakeholders together to create a lot of different kind of projects. So again, I just popped up in my mind, so I have to ask you this. I'd love to know if you can share some of the projects that you're working on, maybe in the cross section of technology and art, or some of the other cross sections that you mentioned. It would really help inspire our audience as well. If you can, please share some of the work that are coming up from the brilliant Indrani.
Well, some of them are still in the confidential stages of development, but I will make sure that the next time I see you, I can tell you more about them. But just one of the projects is a city of the future, and that is, it's very exciting because working with some of the world's greatest thinkers and designers and architects to integrate nature into the built environment in radical ways, and to actually build using the way nature builds. So instead of building in these straight lines and creating a grid system which separates us from nature, we're bringing in trees and vegetation and creating gardens around the way the human living parts, and then also building businesses into that. So people are integrated, and we're not having the rich and the poor separated and having to travel these long distances to see each other, but rather incorporating people together in a much healthier way.
Wow, sounds already like a utopia to me. So looking forward to that, and I wish if Buckminster Fuller was alive, he would be very happy to see some of this great work that you are also doing. Thank you so much, Indrani, for sharing all the interesting projects and some very interesting ideas. At this point, I have a young voice with me. So I have Arushi, who is a young student from India, and she has a couple of questions for you. So Arushi, please introduce yourself and ask your questions.
First of all, ma'am, it's been a really nice session up till now. And as for me, I'm an economics student from the Delhi University, and what I think is first we have to create a ripple at a personal level, which may become a huge wave later. So, coming to the questions, we all know how deep rooted patriarchy is in our society. And it's very hard for a woman to attain a place for herself in this sector of work, and you have fiercely treaded through this to reach the pinnacle. So, how can your individual struggle to overcome the prevalent inequalities resonate with others who are just beginning to thrive in this line of work, let's say? And how do you wish to tell your story to them?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and it's really a very important one. And women around the world, but especially in Asia, are face so much challenges, largely created by social stigmas and superstitions and beliefs that are very far from the reality. Women work harder, in my experience, than men, and intelligence wise women are at least equal. So I think that there is an enormous need for female voices and perspectives in every field, and women bring, I think, a very different perspective because they are used to having to deal with so many different responsibilities and ways of looking at the world. Women tend to look more at the long-term picture. They tend to think about how are their children going to be affected by the things they do today. And not to say that men don't do that. And I think there are wonderful men in the world. But just as a general rule, women are tend to be raised with more of this holistic perspective. And so it's incredibly important that that comes through in each area of work. And so it's the responsibility of every girl to make sure that their voice is heard, to make sure that they get the best education they can get, and that they pursue every opportunity. They don't let someone tell them that they can't do it or that they shouldn't do it. And that, it doesn't matter what anyone tells you. You are the one who must choose how you're going to live your life. And ultimately, it's also the responsibility of the parents and families to nurture their daughters and to give them every opportunity, because they will change the future in the best possible way. And so that, there's many studies that show that societies where women are empowered are societies that thrive, and that by providing resources to girls and women, you actually change a community much more effectively than providing them to the men in the community. And again, I think that both men and women are equally essential to creating the world of the future. And so it's up to us all to work together to make sure that women have an equal voice. And from a personal perspective, I have to say that, for girls and women who are starting out, you have to work 10 times harder than anyone. And that's it. You have to be better, you have to be quicker, you have to do more homework, more research, and you have to be stronger, because there are a lot of challenges that you're going to face. And understanding that from the beginning and accepting that as part of your job will allow you to thrive. It's actually, when you set your goal to achieve something extraordinary, you can achieve it. It's just up to you to set that goal in the first place and not let anything stop you.
I think you answered that very honestly and beautifully. Thank you for that. Coming to the second question is, I'm driven to work towards goal 10, especially because how unnatural it is for someone to face negative consequences by the way they were born. I mean, it's innate. We can't do anything about it. So could you tell us three things or actions that the youth can take to combat growing inequalities at a personal level?
That's a great question. I I think that what's very important is that we all recognize our own privilege. And everyone, if they look around themselves honestly, they will see there are people better off than them and worse off than them. We tend to look at the ones better off and say we want that, but we can't forget the ones who are worse off than us, that are in our vicinity, the people we're close to, the people in our local areas, as well as people on the other side of the world. And we have a responsibility to give back and to share. And so for me, from a very young age, I understood that I was going to grow by doing, I didn't know how to run a school. And I certainly, this was a charitable school that I created, and it took a great deal of time and resources. But what I didn't realize was just how much I ended up growing and learning from that experience. So by giving, you receive so much, and that's not the reason why you should do it, but it's such a healthy flow. And to recognize that if you're only trying to grasp for yourself and you forget about everyone else, you become very narrow-minded, and your ability to influence the world becomes very small. But if you can think about others, there's often many ways you can help. That it may not be a financial help, but you can give advice. If you've gone to school and you see that there's a girl on your block who hasn't gone to school, you can teach her, you can share with her, give her some of your knowledge. That's the least you should do to help make the world better.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Wonderful questions, and so lovely to meet you.
Thank you, ma'am. Same here.
Thank you, Arushi, for your questions, and thank you, Indrani, for spending your valuable time with us and sharing such beautiful insights with us. It's always very difficult to sum up after such an insightful session, but I will try my level best as the host. And few of the things that I am going to take away from this, and everyone who is listening in and joining in should also take away, is to make change happen, we must harness power of our own creativity and be the best we can be. Choice is probably one of the greatest powers we all have in this world, and with greatest power comes even more than the greatest responsibility. And this is probably Spider-Man probably showed us the best way, that with greater power comes greater responsibility. And keeping that in mind, we must be responsible enough towards our choices, so that we make choices. Every choice should create something better, make a better impact, make a better change happen in this world. And as Indrani also said, try and seek out contrary point of view and try and understand that point of view. That will probably help us understand the world around us slightly better. More importantly, world is abundant, so share, and share with joy, because with by giving, you don't know how much you will receive back. On that note, I am almost towards the end of today's session. And once again, Indrani, thank you so much for being with us. But before I go, since I am a quiz master and I never run out of questions, here is my last question to you. If you have to sum up your vision for a better world in one sentence, what would that be?
I would say my vision for a better world is a world in which each person takes full responsibility for the other beings that they share the world with. And that means that in all our acts and in everything we do, we think about how does it make the world better for others? And how can we create um, a greater joy and greater abundance and greater love around us. And that's really, if we can all do that, even for a few minutes each day, we will be creating a planet of a heaven on earth, really. And that's I think what we all deserve to have and to enjoy together.
On that note of creating heaven on earth, to everyone who is listening in and joining in, remember, for a world where no one is left behind, it has never been clearer that all of us have a role to play in order to bring about change. Whoever you are, no matter where you come from, every one of us can make a difference. Every action truly counts. Get involved. Attend the SDG Action Conclave 2020. Participate in the SDG quiz. Help raise awareness about the goals. And connect with a global community of passionate volunteers. This Global Goals Week, let us all come together to spread the knowledge about people, planet, and our sustainable development goals. Thank you once again all for joining us. Follow us on Instagram at Youth Forum India for all the updates. And don't forget to join our next session. Indrani, thank you so much once again for being with us. And till we meet again, everyone, goodbye and keep changing the world.